I am 20 female, have recently moved out of my mother's house for college. I enrolled in scholarship. The other night, my mother wanted her, my younger brother, and I to have dinner together. It's been a while since we've spoken, and I'm afraid this might happen again. We were having a nice night, the dinner was delicious, and honestly, we were all having a good time. Eventually, we got onto the topic of how things were when I was younger. I made the comment on how her behavior when I was younger made me feel like I missed out on a lot of things as a child. She disagrees, and tells me that I'm being dramatic, and that my childhood was perfect. Quote, I was lucky to have a mom who cared as much as she did. My mother gave birth to me when she was 18. My father walked out when I was young, due to a personal conflict between the two. So, she raised me on her own until I was 7. She met a guy, and they ended up having a kid together, my younger brother. He was a golden child to my mom. His father was only a temporary item, as he left as well, soon after. Although the father of my brother was still visible in his life, I didn't have anyone to look up to as a father figure. Eventually, my mom went through a phase of depression after they separated. She started to care less and less about her children, and more about her parties and men she wanted to sleep with. It ended up getting so bad that by the time I was 10, I was a full-time caretaker of my younger brother. With the exceptions of the weekends he was with his father. I started to cook, clean, do everyone's laundry, and take care of everything outside of the boundaries of my home. From ages 13 to 15 I began missing out and losing good friends because I wasn't able to participate in any activity related to anyone else. I didn't get a car or a phone until I was 18, and even then I wasn't allowed to leave my house. I graduated senior year with flying colors and ended up getting a scholarship to a really good college. I took this opportunity not only to focus on myself, but to also help my mother realize that I was not going to be around forever. When she found out I got the scholarship, she threw a fit and told me I wasn't allowed to leave my responsibilities here at home. I left a week after the conversation. I did make sure that my younger brother was safe with his second guardian at the time. My mother and I talked on some occasions but never really kept contact. We got together, and you know the story. She told me I am an asshole for saying that she never really took care of me or my younger brother. I told her that eventually, she will need to get help and stop victimizing herself. But I'm starting to feel guilty, and that maybe I was dramatic after all. I've officially decided that I no longer need my mother in my life at this point in time. I'm now going to only focus on myself, and working towards a successful career in law. Of course, my mom won't take it well, but it won't really matter to her in the long run. Her children never really mattered to her. I'm going to stay in contact with my younger brother, though. I'm going to make sure that he doesn't possibly go through the same amount of trauma I did. My dad died, and I'm scared my family won't get along. So yesterday after my dad comes home he eats what my mom made for him. Eggs and Spam. To be clear, he has a pre-existing medical history of high blood pressure and gout. First found out when he was admitted to the hospital in 2015 when he fell ill, and we basically had to force him to go to the hospital BC he didn't want to go. He was put on medication since, with changes to them maybe a year or so ago. So back to when after he ate. My half-sister heard a thud around 740-ish and told me to check BC. She thought maybe my parents are arguing. I go down and see my dad on the kitchen floor my mom behind him a few feet away, and I hear him snoring. I ask my mom a question, get worried, run back upstairs and knock on my sister's door. She calls my other sister and also tells me to stop wasting time, call 911. I was scared and frantic. I wish I called 911 or saw him when he came in so I could maybe have called sooner. They get frantic too and we all start yelling at each other, and I try to maintain order also as I'm talking to 911 person. At some point in all of this my brother-in-law yells for help and I help him turn my dad onto his side. BC he said he could choke on his saliva. My dad stops snoring and we start panicking. The EMS tells us how to perform CPR, but my sisters keep yelling, and so I try to get them working together. They finally start working on it. One is doing compression and the other giving him air and sometimes rotating. Fire department and ambulance gets here and they start doing the same thing but also have defibrillators, and honestly, I'm just in shock still. It was maybe 8:03 p.m. when they came or so, I don't remember, it's all a blur. I checked my phone for timestamp, But I called twice, so I forgot when original call was placed. They called it at 8:50 p.m. and I just began to lose it. My aunt comes and my sister is trying to call my dad's work to let his bosses know. We talk about how we want my dad's arrangements and agree on cremation. We don't have the money for anything else, but also my sister wants the remains. My mom is bipolar schizophrenic and my sisters and bro-in-law don't get along. Her because of a whole history that would keep you here forever if I tried to type it. My dad was a bad person, but he still chose us and tried his best to provide regardless of his fallacies. He had my mom's back too, saying he wouldn't kick her out or place her in a mental home. My sisters kinda want that, I think, but I'm scared to talk about it. My mom is okay sometimes, but also acts up of her mental illness sometimes, and my dad and I were her constants regardless of what happened. My mom is old and still wants to benefit from some social security services that my dad had, but my sisters and I think we should get a majority control of his account. There's a lot of renovations to be done. He ignored upkeep of the house for a number of years, example, the roof. My mom is not very sad about the ordeal. She had a long history of mental abuse from my dad, and I understand, but we for some reason stayed together. How to move forward except for one moment at a time, and I'm still waiting for funeral home to come pick up his body. It's 8:13 a.m. now, been waiting since night before. And I have been crying, but also I can't sleep, and I'm sorry if this doesn't meet guidelines. I just need to vent. Even though I told a few friends, I'm still in disbelief. How this will moving forward. I believe it can though. But it's hard to stay positive. I come from a conservative Christian family. All my family members were / are involved in the church and have church-based jobs. When they met my wife, they loved her and embraced her as their own. We dated for 2 years and discovered she was pregnant after we got engaged. Invitations were already given at the time, and we decided to still have the wedding on date when my wife was 5 months in. My family were furious when they found out my wife was pregnant. They asked if we even still considered having a wedding. I said why not, but they were very upset, especially mom and dad, who said they've always been known for their decency and good Christian values, and weren't willing to let this stain their reputation. As in my wife and I getting married while pregnant. They officially dropped out and refused to negotiate, saying it was done and I have only myself to blame for this outcome, and should move the wedding out of town. I was hurt. I tried to change their minds and checked with other members, but my brother said he had no intentions to look like a joke in front of his fellow church members and dropped out. My aunt pretended to be sick and said she may not be able to make it. She's 100% healthy. My cousin said he had business trip and stopped his wife and kids from attending, and my uncle cussed me out, torn the invitation, and kicked me out. I felt terrible with no family members of my own to support me and share my joy at my wedding. I even broke down crying after the ceremony. I haven't spoken to them for months and then got busy with my 4-week-old daughter. My cousin reached out to hand me gifts and well wishes for the birth of my daughter sent from my family. I returned everything. He sat with me on behalf of the family, saying I shouldn't have returned gifts that were from my family who want to see and hopefully be involved in my daughter's life. He said Mom's longing to meet her grandbaby and everyone else is wanting to visit soon to celebrate my daughter's life. I asked him this question. I said, wasn't my daughter the reason why the entire lot of them abandoned my wedding? He just stared grudgingly as I went on about how they treated my daughter as something to be ashamed of and hide. My daughter at some point will ask about the wedding, and I have no intentions on lying to her. He replied saying he guaranteed I got it all wrong, and no matter what goes down between us, I can never deny that my daughter is their granddaughter, //niece / etc., and they're her family. He asked that I arrange for them to visit, but I refused. He kept pressing the idea, but I shut him down. My wife says I should let them come, but I still refused. 8 years ago, my sister got pregnant. The father wasn't involved and my sister didn't want the baby, but she also couldn't bring herself to terminate or adopt out to strangers. She approached me and my now ex-husband and asked if we would be willing to adopt her child. We weren't sure as we were concerned this would lead to issues down the line, but my sister insisted that it wouldn't, so we ultimately agreed. Before Lucy was a year old, my husband left us both because my sister lied about Lucy's father. When Lucy was 4, I got together with my wife, and we married last year. My sister has said that seeing me and my wife with Lucy, who is now 7, confirms to her that she made the right decision. When I first adopted Lucy, my husband and I told my sister that we wanted multiple children, which she said she was fine with at the time, but now my wife and I are looking into our options and my sister objects. My sister has been staying with us since July because her boyfriend kicked her out. She keeps asking Lucy if she's sure she wants siblings. Lucy has said that she does, and telling us she's worried we won't be able to give Lucy what she needs. And then today happened. We had an online consultation with a fertility clinic to talk about sperm donation. We told my sister about it and asked her to keep an eye on Lucy while we talked. The Wi-Fi went randomly on and off 3 times during the session, booting us out of the call each time. The 3rd time, my wife went to check it and saw my sister holding the power cord, and Lucy trying to plug it back in. Lucy saw my wife and said, "Auntie keeps turning the Wi-Fi off." Wife plugged it back in, but we could no longer get into the session, and we got an email from the doctor saying that if the Wi-Fi is going to be this bad, then maybe we should try a more local clinic, as we can't do online consultations. When we confronted my sister, she admitted that she wants Lucy to be an only child so she has 100% of our undivided attention, and then said in a sarcastic tone, "Forgive me for only wanting what's best for my daughter." To which we responded that Lucy isn't her daughter. Things escalated until I said that my sister should go stay with our parents, and my wife drove her to their place. Since leaving a few hours ago, she's apologized and begged to come back, and my parents have also asked me to take her back. But I've refused. They've all called me an arsehole for kicking my own sister out after one argument, because now she's unable to get to work. No car and too far to walk, and she's back in her childhood room while at our place she had a studio to herself behind the house.